This is Dr. B. Maithili Gnanamangai, working as Assistant Professor in the Department of Biotechnology, K.S. Rangasamy College of Technology. Today I am here to share my thoughts and views on biotechnological interventions in preserving endangered flora. So we all renown this day as World Endangered Species Day. So I'm here to deliver and share my thoughts, views on the biotechnological interventions in preserving this endangered flora species. So let's learn first what is endangered. The term endangered is in between the living and the extinct species. So it not only renounce that the species is under a danger, its habitat and ecosystem is also in danger. So after this endangered criteria, it will move on to the next criteria, that is critically endangered. So we should not let any of the species to this movement of from the endangered to the critical endangered, because after the critically endangered system, it will move on to the extinct species. So we should take an immediate measure to prevent the extinction of any species in this world, existing in this world, when it is renowned as endangered itself. So as flora is one of our rich biodiversity system, we are in a position to conserve this biodiversity. So as usual, when biodiversity conservation comes into mind, it's conserved in two different types. One is in situ conservation and another one is ex situ conservation. So in situ conservation, the term itself means protecting that species in that particular area itself, that is its habitat system itself, through any protected area network system. So it's usually performed like sacred groves or sacred lakes, biosphere reserves, or national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, etc. Whereas ex situ situation, ex situ type of biodiversity conservation means a plant or any animal animal resources can be preserved at sites apart from their origin, apart from their habitat area. So that is like sacred plants, home gardens, seed banks, field gene banks, cryopreservation, etc. And also we can have botanical gardens, arboreta, zoological gardens, aquaria, etc. So now we can see that after the invention of modern biotechnology, like recombinant DNA experiments came into the field, that is when it came into the real field, like in the year 1980, when many companies started to use the recombinant DNA technologies in their company applications, and then started to have many products and patents related to their experiments. So with this advent, there are a lot of studies are going on in using this recombinant DNA technologies to prevent this type of endanger or extinction of any species in this world. So like that, we are going to bioprospect the biological wealth with the help of biotechnological tools. Now we are going to see a lot more areas of biotechnological tools that are being prospected to preserve the genes, biomolecules of any plants, which is titled as endangered system. So now we know we come across a lot of plants which is economically important, like high yield varieties, and medicinally important, like it has many medicinal values, it has therapeutic values, and agriculturally important value products. So that species richness and allied varieties which are considered to have an identical genetic resource needs to be fingerprinted, and it should be compared, and it should be known for its difference due to its geographical locations, everything. So all this thing can be done with the help of this biotechnological tools. So up to so far now, there were about 25 stress tolerant genes were identified, and these stress tolerance genes can be transferred to the plants which are in stress conditions, that is endangered species. So endangered species will move on to the critically endangered when they face the stress. So if we transfer the stress tolerant genes to that particular endangered species, it can withstand in the habitat and move on from the endangered to the normal living state. So that's what people are doing many studies and trying to implement in our system. So now let's see how this biotechnology in ex situ conservation is going to help us and to stop this process of endangerment to extinction movement. So here, the ex situ conservation doesn't work alone. It should complement work along with the in situ conservation modes, and then only it can give us the fruitful product of saving the endangered species. So this too has to work in synergistic way. When we are going on concentrating on ex situ concentration, we need to go and collect for pure strains, and we should avoid hybridization, and we should minimize the impacts on wild population. So that's if that's possible, then ex situ conservation will be a best method. And to be in a living state, we need in situ conservation also. So for that, number of ex situ conservation practices are adopted so far. So some of them I have mentioned below, like gene banks, seed banks, tissue culture bank, seedling banks, conservation strands, cryopreservation of ova, sperm, or embryo. And this is a tabulation which I have listed the advantages and disadvantages of various ex situ conservation methods. So as all the ex situ methods, ex situ conservation methods share a same kind of advantage, like they require minimum work, minimum space is required. Apart from that, it has its own advantages and disadvantages. Let's see what are they. So seed banks, so it's have its advantage of propagal readily available for its use. The disadvantages is recalcitrant seeds cannot be conserved. Large seed preservation is also problematic, and it does not conserve the associated species. In case of pollen banks, the advantage is that it can be used for recalcitrant or orthodox seeds, and only the disadvantage is the half of the genome can be conserved. And similarly, tricellular pollen storage is also a problematic situation in case of pollen banks. And then the next one is tissue culture bank. It has the advantage of reducing the genetic erosion, and the propagules can be produced in a short time. And it has a problem in the area of sampling, and the somoclonal variation problem is also the problem or disadvantages in case of tissue culture banks. In case of DNA or gene banks, the advantage is species with high extinction potential can be conserved, and it is applicable to all kinds of plants and animals. But the thing is, it's very costly to maintain the system, and it is not an easy method, and it requires skilled personnel to maintain the DNA or gen bank. Cryopreservation method is a method that we can apply for all kinds of plants and animal components. But the disadvantage is since it involves freezing with liquid nitrogen, it's a very costly method, and the viability of healthy zone is sometimes a questionable thing. Now let's see that every ex situ conservation technology have its own purpose. So I have listed some of the purposes in this table of different ex situ conservation technologies. Here you can see artificial insemination and cryopreservation of sperm, ova, embryo of animals can be done for animals for storing the germplasm of wild animals especially, and other methods has its own purpose, and I have listed some examples also in this table. For example, embryo micropropagation is done for the purpose of increasing the population, and embryo access cryopreservation is done for the purpose of storing the recalcitrant species, and storage of seeds in the moist substrate is done for breaking the dormancy, and seed storage at low temperature is done to impose the dormancy. So next, let's see the scenario of this endangered species in India level. So currently in India, there is a list of about 159 species of plant varieties that has been revealed by the Indian authorities, policymakers as endangered one. So here they have done a lot of activities and they have imposed a lot of in situ conservation methods for preserving all our Indian varieties which are considered as endangered. So now we need to move on to the investing some of the money in the ex situ conservation methods, especially seed banks, gene banks, and doing a network along with the DNA bank system countries. So the countries whichever have the details on the DNA databases, that should be networked for our country, and we should work together to save the species that are considered to be endangered. So here is the networking system already is available for some of the crops like millets, sugarcane, and then groundnut is conserved by Indian authorities like ICAR and ICRISAT. So similarly, other species like rice is conserved by Philippines. So we need networking for other plants also. Since these are the major crops, economically important crops, we are concentrating on only the economically important crops, but this should be avoided. This should be given high importance to all the crops, all the biodiversity involved crops, which is under endangered condition. So now, because of the awareness about the threat to the germplasm of our ancient varieties, we are moving on to germplasm conservation. So whatever the wild varieties we thought is genetically rich ancestral forms should be protected. Because of the bad farming practices that we have done, we are into the wholesale loss of plant genetic resources. This is called as genetic erosion actually. So it can slow our process, and it can reduce the stability of the genes, so that the plants may lose its own natural wild type germplasms, which is actually gene rich. So these practices should be avoided. So in addition, we also should emphasis on certain germplasm conservation methods. So that should be given a high priority today, especially with respect to the agriculture. A better understanding on gene banks requires an appreciation of all kinds of materials. So based on the types of germplasm, it's organized into 5 different modes. So first one is varieties of cultivars in current use are often considered as elite varieties. And then the second type of category is absolute cultivars. This is different from the elite varieties because it's also an elite varieties, but it is practiced 20 to 50 years ago. The third category is primitive cultivars and land races. So it's the used species in traditional agricultures. And then the next one is wild and weed taxa. So it is a near relative crop plants. So that should also be preserved. And the next one is special genetic stocks, which includes the induced mutant plants. Next, I would like to give some visual treat on on 2 main plants that is considered as endangered system. The first one is western flytrap. So this is one plant that is critically endangered. So the distribution of this is an endemic to the Western Ghats, and now it is critically endangered, and there is no conservation measure taken to preserve this plant. And next, this is Dalzels freeae. So it's also a rare endangered plant. Its collection and export is totally banned. And the status is that in the world announced endangered species, it is one among the 12 species as listed by the IUCN, and it is widely seen earlier in many parts of India, but now it is endemic only to Junnar and Purandare hills of Pune district of Maharashtra. So next, I would like to emphasize on gene sanctuaries. So which are constructed for the conservation of genetic diversity under natural habitat systems. Actually, it can be constructed only when there is a zone with this which is protected from human interference. So such type of gene sanctuary should be established in the center of the diversity or microcenter. India has also set up one first gene sanctuary in the Garo hills of Assam of wild relatives of citrus. Similarly, efforts are also being made to set up gene sanctuaries for banana, sugarcane, rice, and mangoes. And then the next type is germplasm. So germplasm is nothing but the gene banks is otherwise referred as germplasm. So there are this is the best way of storing conserving any forms of plants, which is rich in genetic source like seeds. It can be stored, pollens, it can be stored, or in the form of in vitro cultures can also be stored. So this is mainly categorized into two types. One is seed gene bank and another one is field gene bank. Let's see both of them in detail. First, let's look into field gene banks. So field gene banks are the living collections of plants. So here, the plants conservation strategy is for long-lived, it is usually done for long-lived perennials, recalcitrant species, and vegetative propagated species. So this field gene bank is mainly accessible to educational purposes and research purposes. So here it is actually a method that helps us to study the genetic variations and its original location, why the variation is because of any external factors or not. So in that way, we can study lot of samples and species, subspecies, everything, all variety from which variety it is transferred. So everything we can come to know because of this field gene banks. It's a live collection of a particular species. So, and it is also a common method practice for recalcitrant seeds and vegetatively propagated plants. Next, let's look into the seed gene bank. So it's one of the convenient technology that we have where we can store the germplasm in the form of seeds. So it requires only less storage space, and it is very convenient, as I said earlier, and seeds of all crops cannot be stored because as per the temperature required for storing, we need to give concern, and based on the type of durations that it requires for conservation, we are categorizing it into three ways: short term, medium term, or long term. And if the seed requires to be conserved for long term storage, that is 50 plus years, then we need to go for storing in minus 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. Whereas for active collections like short term storage, like 3 to 5 years period, it requires only 5 to 10 degrees Celsius of storage of seeds. Now let's also look into the another method like in vitro storage method. The only problem with this method is chilling injury is possible with the help with this in vitro storage method, and it requires a high technical expert and long-term maintenance with respect to the equipment as well as the requirement of liquid nitrogen. So this is a storage of any species germplasm in the form of cold storage like cryopreservation in liquid nitrogen. But it is optimal for any long storage method, that is 50 plus years of storage can be viable for this thing once it is optimized and it has a possibility to retry, then this is the best method. Next, let's see more about the DNA banks. So the DNA banks should be given high emphasis by creating a lot of networks, because it's not possible for concentrating on only one country's genetic resources, because it is a mere loss if we start from a scrap. So a lot of other countries working on the same species will have a certain stage, might have attained a certain stage where it might have certain genes and DNAs responsible for particular traits. So we can go on with them. So world gene pool is required for DNA banks. That is, networking is required for DNA banks to be established in any country. So if any country establish a DNA bank, it should come volunteer for networking also. But once it is optimized, then it's a method where we can store quickly at low cost. And it helps to be used for studying the molecular phylogenetics and systemics of extinct taxa with the help of PCRs. So with the help of PCR, we can identify what's the system that has brought that particular taxa to an extinct. With the help of DNA samples, we can also bioprospect into the many biodiversity studies. That is possible only with the help of DNA. And of course, DNA gen banks cannot produce a whole plant as such that of other tools like a micropropagation. But the thing is, the gene that has a potential trait can be preserved and it can be reconstituted in any other plant so that the new plant can produce that particular character. So this is possible with the help of DNA bank. Now let's move on to the next variety like biochemical marker. So these are the next stages that I'm saying, that from biochemical marker, phytochemical marker, and then to the DNA marker. We'll move on to the system like that. So first let's see a look on biochemical marker. So this biochemical marker, it's like different variants of same enzymes having an identical function can be renowned as isozymes. With the help of isozyme electrophoresis, we can able to identify clones and examine the clone structure of the plant populations. So we can, it's a powerful tool in terms of studying the genetic variability within and between the populations of both animals and plants. And this isozymes is used to study the taxonomy, genetic evolutions, and the ecological studies, and also for the identification of cultivars and its strains. And this tool is very much useful to predicting the homology exactly with respect to some DNA markers. Along with the DNA markers, it can perform the study of homology very well. Next, let's move on to the phytochemical markers. So this is the phytochemical marker is we have plants with certain phytochemicals or novel compounds which can be produced only by that particular plant. So that phytochemical analysis or profiling should be done and deposited in certain way, so such that that particular plant should be attributed for that particular phytochemical activity. If the compound is novel, then has the capacity to cure some human diseases, then we need to go for higher stages of profiling, like identifying these structures with the help of mass spectrophotometry or nuclear magnetic resonance methods, spectrophotometry. So with the help of these methods, then we will also come to know what are the valuable tools for taxonomic differentiation has occurred within the species, and for evaluating the effect on the environmental factors that has imposed on this plant to produce that particular phytochemical product. So this will also help us to synthesize that particular metabolite in a higher way, so that we can utilize the plant for other next purposes like medicinal purposes, etc. Now let's move on to the higher category of tools like DNA-based markers. We all know more number of markers are there in this era, and with the help of markers, DNA-based markers, we can study the variation and evaluation within the species and other species, among the species easily. So it's easily traceable one. So there are, we can use either PCR-based markers or DNA-based, non-PCR-based markers. It gives us complete genetic structures of the plant species, such as embryology, genetic engineering, physiology, and taxonomy. So these markers also help us to identify the plant species that is existing in the local markets, which is actually the particular herb that we can identify with the help of DNA markers. We can avoid adulteration of the herb species also. With the help of this DNA markers, we can also do molecular linkage analysis mapping, and then the potential genes can be identified, located, and then it can be improved so that the important traits can be carried out to the next plant generation. It is widely used to study the genetic diversity with the help of polymorphism. Let's go in detail about the polymorphism that is used for studying this genetic diversity. So first one is randomly amplified polymorphic DNA, that is RAPD. It's a very quick and easy process when compared to other polymorphism studies. So it helps us to develop the arbitrary sequence of primers, and it also resolves most of the technical obstacles owing to its cost. Especially, it is very effective and easy to perform once optimized. And this is the first method for polymorphic studies. If the gene is unknown or the plant is unknown, then we need to perform this RAPD. So it also helps us to assess the genetic relationship among the various accessions of different plant species. Next sort of primer is that next sort of DNA marker is the sequence characterized amplified region marker, that is called as SCAR. So this is an advancement of RAPD, where this sequence characterized amplified region SCAR helps us to construct a unique band of markers and helps us to produce a longer primer, design a longer primer that specifically bind to that particular loci exactly, so that the amplification of that particular gene is alone done. So it is a very useful one, and it is a very selective one too. Next advantageous marker is that simple sequence repeat. This is called as SSR. So this is a randomly repeated DNA sequence throughout the genome. So with respect to plant species, every 6 to 7 kilobase pair will have this tandem repeats. So, but it requires a complete genome mapping of any species, so which requires a networking support. Many of the countries have taken forward in producing a genetic diversity with the help of simple sequence repeats. So they have constituted the genome map of a particular plants. So if that country have some economically important crops, they have come forward and created a whole genome sequence of that particular specific crops, which I have also listed here for numerous crops. There is already whole genome sequencing is available with the help of simple sequence repeat marker system. And but the DNA information is required to do this sequence, simple sequence repeat system as marker. Next, we will look into intersimple sequence repeat. So this is the next marker, which is widely used for the species which have sequence information that is limited. So it is also used to study the genetic diversity, and it helps us to study about the plant species, clonal species that have a great discriminating power. So this type of sequencing repeat is used as a marker, as a tool. And then many countries like China have constituted the genetic marker system like ISSR, and they have sequenced the endangered species. So like this, we have to take this as a thought-provoking session and use that type of markers in our country, which is facing lots of endangered species. Here, I would like to mention some of the genetic diversity of particular endangered trees like Dimorphandra wilsoni, and widely distributed species of Dimorphandra mollis have been studied for its identification of genetic diversity, structure, and the conservation is also done. It's actually a quick and easy to handle, more reproducible than any of the RAPD markers. So people used to opt this ISSR when there is the sequence information is little. We should also know about the other markers that are available for conservation of endangered species. Some of them I have listed here. So first one is restricted fragment length polymorphism, and the next one is amplified fragment length polymorphism, and the next one is selective amplification of microsatellite polymorphic loci, and single nucleotide polymorphism like SNP, and expressed sequence tag like EST, single strand conformation polymorphism, cleave amplified polymorphic sequence. Next, there are also additional markers that is available to us, especially ITS, that is internal transcript spacer, ITS sequence, chloroplast spacer sequence. So these are markers that are specific to particular organelle of particular plant species. So it will be very conserved region for any plant. So if we have sequence for chloroplast spacers, then it is well and good that we can preserve, we can use that markers for preventing or conserving any genetical diversity studies and conservation. Next is DNA microarray. Since we all know it's a functional genomic tool, and it helps us to predict the genes expressed in a particular plants. That type of gene pool system can be studied with the help of DNA microarray. Functional genomics is only possible with the help of a system like DNA microarray. So we should also go to use the next level of biotechnological tools like DNA microarray for creating a functional genomic profiling for any endangered species. So that will help us to study the plant varieties in detail. Next is the plant DNA bank conservation. So it is a type of conservation for any vast diversity of flora. So the database database that arises due to this plant DNA bank is similar to that of DNA bank. That will be an efficient utilization of germplasm. So that type of plant DNA bank should be possible worldwide access. So one country can focus on particular endangered species of plant DNA banks, means then it can be distributed so that the plant that is considered as endangered should be improved and it should be identified, and we should propagate that sort of identify the particular environmental factors that is required for that particular endangered species, and we should promote that plants in their favorable habitats. So whole plant diversity, biodiversity can be studied, including the temperature, salinity, altitudes, habitat fragmentation, exposure to drought or pollution should be studied. And then with the help of that database, we can promote this endangered species in a worldwide manner. So that is possible only with the help of plant DNA bank. It helps us to protect the plant species in a wide network. So that's the main motto of this plant DNA bank. So next, we should also focus on some of the other unconventional biotechnological tools that is used for conservation of plant species. So first one is micropropagation. Next, we will study about protoplasmic culture. Third is somatic embryogenesis. Fourth is organogenesis. Fifth is micrografting, and then sixth is cryopreservation. Let's look into detail of each and every unconventional biotechnological methods that is available for plant conservation. So first, let's look into detail about micropropagation. So we all know about plant tissue culture. So this plant tissue culture is mainly due to the totipotency of that plant cell. So a single cell as a germplasm can develop into whole plant. So that type of resource now we have. So if you have any single cell also of any extinct species, then we should have we have the capability to produce that particular plant through micropropagation. So this micropropagation is an effective tool if we have a single cell of any extinct flora. So that should say that we can prevent the extinct stage itself. So with the help of micropropagation only, we have the ability to produce any live plants with a single cell of any plant. So that kind of advantage we have with the help of micropropagation. So next is protoplasmic culture. As we already said that stress tolerance genes are identified right now. So how we are going to transfer those stress tolerant genes to that particular plant which is under stress condition. So that is highly possible with the help of this protoplasmic culture. So we can take two protoplasms. So one is a protoplasm that is genetically rich and it's considered to be endangered. And next is a protoplasm that is having a stress tolerant gene. Now I'm going to fuse this two protoplasm and make as a single cell with the protoplasm that has both the genetic structure of the rich genetic source as well as the capability to tolerate the stress condition. So this is possible with the help of protoplasmic culture with the special agents like polyethylene glycol we can have, and we can fuse this protoplasm and make the wild varieties to survive in the stressful areas, habitats where it can survive and it can cross over the endangered stage. Somatic embryogenesis. It is a whole embryogenesis system, type of embryogenesis that is occurred from a single cell, mainly of callus. So callus is like a differentiated cell that is arrived from any part of the plant. So from that callus cells, we can produce a whole embryo. So that is somatic embryogenesis. This is all possible only with the help of micropropagation. It's all variants of micropropagations that we are studying. And next one is organogenesis. So as I said, this is also one variant of tissue culture, plant tissue culture. Here, any organ of plant, like say a meristem or a tip of a plant, a shoot of a plant, or a internode of a plant, node of a plant is taken, and that is converted into a whole plant, that is regenerated into the whole plant. So how it's possible? It's possible in two different ways, either direct organogenesis or indirect organogenesis. Direct organogenesis with a combination of auxin and cytokine hormones high and low ratio, we can produce shoots and roots. So that is possible with directly from the explants itself. We can cut the explants and subject it to rooting medium and then to shooting medium. Then we will get the whole plant. So that is called as direct organogenesis. Next way is indirect organogenesis, which is derived after the callus. So after the callus, if the callus doesn't enter into the embryo stage, and without the embryo stage, if it enters into the production of roots or shoots, then we call it as indirect organogenesis. So that is also possible. So with these methods, we can constitute any type, conserve any type of plant species. So these all helps us to preserve a plant in ex situ condition. And this is another method, that is a micrografting. So as the name refers, grafting, top part of one plant like scion is attached, grafted to root part of another plant, which is older one or any younger one is then grafted and constituted a grafted plant. This is practiced both in lab condition as well as in the field condition, and it has been proved for many plants. So this micrografting also will help a plant to survive in the endangered environment. So next, this is cryopreservation. Cryopreservation is a method which we have studied earlier in detail itself. So this says not only it can be done with the help of only DNA storage or seed storage, it can also preserve the plant tissue culture products. Like the plant tissue culture stages can be preserved with the help of cryopreservation, as the picture depicts. A plant tissue culture storage system is having a cryopreservation area where we can go for storing the tissue culture plants for cryopreservation with the help of skilled persons and the specific equipments that is supplied with liquid nitrogen. So next, we will also see about some of the genetic manipulations that is available for us to improve the yield of any quality traits. So it is already available for improving the yield. Why not to improve the quality of endangered species? As I said about the protoplasmic culture and all earlier. So this is also a system that is available for us to improve the genetic resource of any particular plants that is under danger. So like agrobacterium tumifications, let's say, so this type of agrobacterium tumification will help us to transfer the tDNA from agrobacterium tumefaciens to the another plant, host plant. So that host plants, consider that host plant as an endangered plant. So with the help of this agrobacterium tumefaciens, we cannot we can produce any product. Similarly, we can also improve the yield of economic crops, as well as why not we preserve the endangered plants. So that can be done with the help of agrobacterium tumification mediated transformation. And next is RNA interference technology. And this is a well-known technology and proven technology where the technology says that it channelizes a particular plant from producing one metabolite alone. And it also stops any enzyme production that hinders the propagation of that particular plant. So why not we can use this RNA interference technology in endangered species? So it's all possible. With the help of RNA technology, RNA interference technology, we can also channelize the metabolites and enzyme systems of any endangered species such that it grow in a stressed environment. And next is molecular forming. So with the help of this endangered plants, we can create molecular forming, like whatever the molecules, bioactive molecules we require, we can use the endangered plants to produce our products so that it will also grow and it will enrich our biodiversity, as well as it gives us molecules whatever we require. So that is possible with the help of molecular forming for high production of bioactive components, as well as we can preserve the endangered species. So with this, I come to a conclusion that whatever the biotechnological tools that we have in our hand to study can be used to conserve any endangered species also. Now we have a lot more medicinally important plants in this endangered list. That's a hypothetical situations that we are facing right now. So medically important plants should be preserved. It should be given high priority when compared to other plants, but we should not neglect other plants also. Since it also have a role in biodiversity, we can use all these technologies to prevent this endangered system, and to prevent this title of endangerment. We can use DNA banking and then gene banking to be established, so that we can have a high conservation strategy under ex situ system, so that if we fail in situ also, we can use this ex situ methods and prevent any taxa loss, and we can reconstitute any taxa at any point of time. So implementation of such biotechnological tools on this rare and endangered plants will help us to revive any lost previous genes and their products. So once plant gone cannot be brought at any point of time. So we should think twice, thrice, and many times before we lose a plant, or before we put a plant in a type of endangered. We need an immediate action of using any tools at any point of higher value. We should preserve the genetic DNA resources and everything of that particular endangered species. So with this, I complete my session on this biotechnological interventions, which is already happening. And I also request all the participants of this session to take up this as one of the important thought to preserve, method to preserve any type of endangered species that you can try out and come with conserving the particular plants in your area with the help of biotechnological tools. Thank you.